Hi, welcome to Minerva. This isn't going to be a reading. This is going to be a dream post. And I'm calling it a dream post even though it was technically not a dream. I don't want to have my video taken down for censorship. So I'm trying to be very careful, and I will have to be very careful with the words that I use. So I suffered with major depression for decades. And I am someone who hates being here. I have tried on multiple occasions to leave, and I have been successful only to be told I needed to come back, or it's not my time, and or just being brought back without no words. So the time before, actually the last time I tried to leave, there was no words, but the time before that, I was told that I had to stay. If not, there would be consequences for the world. Now, this is something that when I saw the consequences, it was something that I didn't believe. I was just like, yeah, this is not going to happen. I'm not going back. I don't want to go back. I have no interest in going back. And I had no choice. I had to go back, and I was advised I need to remember who I was. And then it ended. That was it. I was cut off. So when this happened, it was May of 2019. And at that time, what I saw doesn't seem like it could potentially happen at all because of the time shot. It was fine, right? There was nothing going on that was really serious. There was a few civil wars, like in Syria and I think another country, I can't remember. Really nothing going on to make me think that what I was shown would ever occur. The next thing, or the next reason why I didn't believe it, is because I can't do anything. I'm a nobody. I don't have any power. I don't have any influence. I'm nothing. I can't even get more than 0 views on my YouTube channel. So what can I do, right? And this version that I saw, this thing was something that seemed way bigger than me. And I felt like it's not my problem, essentially. Like, I can't fix that. It's a really big issue. So what did I see? I had saw pretty much millions of people, in other words, leaving this earth. There were people that were starving, essentially famine, and there was a pandemic. And a pandemic is just an outbreak that's around the world. How did I know it was a pandemic? I don't know. I just knew. And this pandemic was an unknown disease, and it was virulent. So virulent is described as something that is highly D-word, ends with a ly. And generally speaking, it is taking out people very fast. Usually things that are very virulent there's really not much you can do. Generally speaking, there's not much you can do for stuff that are virulent. Unlike other diseases that are less virulent but maybe more contagious, virulent stuff generally don't spread as quickly because the host doesn't last long enough most of the time. But things that are very contagious, which is called the infectivity rate. So you have usually moderate to mild diseases have a higher infectivity rate. But that's not always the case. You have some that can be very, very contagious, which is also virulent. And those are usually some of your airborne pathogens. And airborne, a lot of it has to do with the size of each virion. So something, for example, like TB is less than, a certain size. I'm not going to go into the details I was about to, but I realized that would be too much information. So let's just stick to that. This particular illness, I don't know what it was, but it was something that was new, and it was virulent and very contagious. This guy looked like a sepia type color. I don't really know what color this is, but it's the color of the more yellow orange looking dirt, similar to clay but not as red. And I've seen this dirt plenty of places, but I'm specifying it because I garden, and in my garden I use like that nice brown dirt that is great soil, but then there's just the regular one that it pretty much coated the sky from all the bombings on the ground. And this was on US soil, which I find fascinating because it was not too long ago where I saw a TikToker who was saying that US has never been bombed on their land and it's not going to happen, etc. But that's what I saw. There was bombing here, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was more, like, not just regular bombings, but maybe even nuclear weapons. I don't know this for sure. All I know is that it was a lot of chaos. It was a devastating scene. It looked like people being hurt. I didn't see anyone physically fighting. All I saw was civilians that were harmed, and it was millions of people. And mind you, the reason why I saw this was because so many of the locations were flattened out, and I was walking for a while viewing all of this. Despite the tragedy that I saw, I still didn't want to return. I had made up my mind, like, I'm done. Like, I didn't try to cross over for no reason, of course, but I didn't have a choice. And I want you to keep in mind, I saw way more than what I'm describing here, but the rest of the stuff is very personal and not something I'm going to, or I feel comfortable revealing. After returning, I didn't think, based on that time, May of 2019, that what I saw was even possible, especially since I can't do anything about it. But when the Ukraine and Russian war occurred in 2020, I started to wonder, maybe this is a possibility, but it still seemed a little far-fetched. So I was a little worried, but then I was like, maybe it won't, right? Maybe it won't escalate. Now in 2026, I'm thinking maybe this will happen. The thing is that in the past few years, I've worked in the health field, and I specifically work with infectious disease and surveillance as well as reporting. And I've tried my best to help with how things are done to make it efficient, and all that's done is made me unemployed. I don't see us being able to respond, at least in my area, I don't see us being able to respond efficiently or well to any type of disease outbreak. And I definitely don't see that being something that is in my control in any way, shape, or form. And then I realized last week when I was thinking about this, I was like, you know what? I've had the gift of sight since I was a child. However, my gift of sight most of the time, and I would say like 90-ish% of the time, is usually with death. It's not the typical like, oh, there's, I don't know, a new person you're going to meet or something type of stuff. And this was something from childhood. So what will happen, and the easiest way I can explain this is, if someone was going to pass away in the next 7 days, I would get a feeling, a very strong feeling. And that feeling usually would stay until they finally crossed over. Now, if someone was like, they didn't have to be ill, but they had something that they probably didn't know they have. Usually no one knows at that time, but they have something that's going to take them out in the future. What will happen is I'll feel similarly, but not as strongly as if it was within the 7 days. So an example would be someone that they're going to probably cross over due to a heart attack. So they have issues that will lead to that heart attack one day. Or it could be that they have some kind of kidney defect. And oftentimes people with kidney problems, they don't feel anything different. They may not know. Same with liver. That's why things like hepatitis B, hepatitis C is considered a silent, K word. And, end it with iller. So generally, these things you're not going to know initially. And what will happen is I'll feel like, okay, something's wrong with this person. Now, I won't know what it is. It isn't until they pass that we find out, oh, they have whatever of the liver, whatever of the kidneys, they didn't really know. And it, was very sudden, etc. So the longest a prediction ever happened, and mind you, I don't tell anybody this, I just know this. The longest I've seen this was 11 years. So I realized, like, first off, I felt like I was being gaslit by spirit, because y'all are like, you need to remember who you are so that this can be prevented. But then I recall last week that I've never been able to prevent any type of death, never been able to prevent it. And that's because usually what will happen is, first of all, I'm not going to say, hey, you're probably going to pass soon. I may say something very subtle like, hey, you need to be very careful, or maybe you should cancel your trip, because those people, it's within the 7 days, and they usually are not going to listen to me, and I'm not going to go into depth because no one wants to hear that. So generally what will happen is, things happen. So the only thing I do now is I may contact a family member. Like if it's a close family member, like I'll say, hey, you probably should talk to so-and-so. You probably need to, say something to them or whatever. Reach out and hope that they do reach out prior to the person crossing over. So that's all I would do now. So essentially, I should have known this. And for the past few years, I was racking my brain on how I could possibly prevent something so catastrophic that has nothing to do with me, essentially. Like, it's way above and beyond my capacity. I'm unemployed now. I have been, and haven't been able to get a job for a long time. And I started this channel in hopes to really help people, because I know that I'm connected to spirit. I can use the cards along with my abilities to give more foresight than a normal person, because the tarot is limited. Oracle cards, tarot cards, they're limited, but having the additional sight can give more info. And so I thought this would be great, but apparently my gift doesn't matter because it doesn't go anywhere. So it's just one of those things where it's like holding on to information for so long and it not being useful really doesn't make any sense. So I'm just sitting here waiting to see the end. So getting back to the prediction, the longest has been 11 years, and that person had a kidney deficiency. Of course, initially no one knew about this, and it was one of those things that it pretty much just happened. And sometimes that's what it is. Like, you may have a medication that you take, no one knows you have this dysfunction, you take it, and then all of a sudden you have a reaction, a really severe reaction, and then you go to the hospital and it's like, oh, you have kidney failure, because this is not for someone who has kidney damage, but you didn't know, no one knew. And usually this occurs very often in younger people. So this is something where young people usually are considered healthy, even though they may not be. Same thing with heart. You may have had a congenital heart issue. No one knew. It was something small, and you decided to go drinking, and next thing you know, you're unconscious, and come to find out, oh, you had a heart problem, and you wouldn't have known if you hadn't drank the alcohol. So, these are the things that generally would occur, and I wouldn't know, they wouldn't know. I just would have the feeling like, oh, there's something's wrong. And it wasn't until, having these feelings around these certain people, feeling that way and being like, they're still here, they're not passing, so why do I still feel this way every time around this person? It wasn't until the incident happened that I realized, oh, I probably knew like they had something that could possibly get them to that point. Like, this was an issue for all these years, but they didn't know. And of course, I'm not going to know what the issue is. So, yeah. But anyways, another thing that would occur, and this doesn't happen often, would be dreams. So I remember when there was this artist that came to visit to perform, and some people had passed at his concert. At that time, I happened to live very close by, and the concert was extremely loud. It was just a very loud concert. I couldn't hear my movie that I was watching over the concert. Like, the concert was that loud. Like, my desk was vibrating and everything. Well, that night, I went to sleep and I dreamt that I saw a bunch of photos on a fence. And it looked like a memorial because you have like some flowers and some nice words here and there. And I remember seeing that going, I wonder where that is. That looks like it could be a familiar place. Like, I think I know where that is. And so I had went to work as usual and then drove by the area that I thought it was, and those things weren't up. That same day I also found out that some people had passed away at the concert. So I was like, okay, maybe those are going to be the pictures that are put up, the one that I saw in my dream. And it took a few days, but they finally put it up and I was like, yep, there they are. So sometimes things come through in that way where I'll get a dream. And generally, this is usually something that's in my vicinity, but not necessarily connected to me. So just like, okay, I'm physically close to the location, but I didn't actually go to the concert type thing. Or someone whose locker is a few lockers down in the same area, but I don't actually talk to this person. Or someone that's in my class or at my workplace, but I don't actually talk to this person. And it is not like the whole building, usually like on the same floor. So, and then with people, as far as sensing, is generally people that are either close in my location, like I pass by them and I can sense it, or close friends or family, like people I talk to on a regular or semi-regular basis. So it's not going to be just someone that I've never met before, don't know, never seen, nothing, like completely separate. But this dream that I had, and I'm talking about the one where I had crossed over myself and crossed back, that is different because it was shown to me while I was on the other side. And I'm beginning to realize that it probably will occur, and which also leads me to not understand why I'm still here, because if this is going to happen anyways, what's the point? Why not allow me to be able to stay? Because if this ending is going to occur, then what's the point? We can't do anything about it. And I'm not saying that to be completely and utterly just depressing. I don't want to bum anybody out. However, based on what I see, I don't see any different pathway. It just seems like it slowly is getting to that point. But the biggest reason why I mention my abilities is because when I think of the time frame, I don't know the time, and generally I never do. I'm able to guesstimate the time based on the past. So for example, when I feel it's going to happen very soon, it generally happens within 7 days. Whereas those times where the feeling isn't as strong, then I know that the time is unlimited. And the maximum time was 11 years. And using that time frame, again, a possible guesstimate for the future, I would say that this pinnacle in this war is going to happen within 4 years. And that's just guesstimating based on the time frame, because this happened in this dream, or yeah, I'm gonna call it a dream, even though it wasn't. It happened in 2019, May of 2019. So that will be 7 years in May, and 4 years from that. And that again is just guesstimating based on the 11-year past time. It could be a much further time frame. It could be, who knows, 15 years, 20 years, but the trajectory right now looks like it's happening soon. And again, that's 4 years max. Like oftentimes the time varies as far as when things happen. Like I said, with the different circumstances, people have crossed over at different times, and they were within the 11 years. 11 years is just the maximum time that I've seen things happen. It's happened as short as 1 or 2 years, but we know for a fact, 7 years, or about in May, about 7 years will pass. So it was definitely longer than 7. Either way, I figured I would just post this even though no one hears it. Maybe someone has an NDE in the past 6 years and they haven't updated information. I really don't know, but I do know that none of it really makes sense to me. And when I say none of it, the dream made perfect sense. Everything I saw made sense. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary or unbelievable or anything like that. What didn't make sense was it occurring because in May of 2019, there was no indication that this could potentially occur in the future. Now I realize that yes, it could definitely potentially occur in the future. And I also realized that it was going to happen anyways. There's nothing I could have done about this, which is what perplexes me the most, because if this was going to occur anyways, why did I need to return? Why couldn't I stay departed and eternally rest in peace? Regardless, I'm just waiting to see what could happen in the future, how things could potentially turn around, if it will turn around, and hope that being here wasn't a waste of time, which I feel it was. I'm different from everyone else. Unlike a lot of people out there that have the very positive and happy outlook, my life was very, very difficult. And I understand that it needed to be this way in order to force an awakening. However, it doesn't erase how traumatic those experiences were. And I always knew that I'm not the one to be a messenger for anything or anybody. I don't have that kind of personality, and I've never been an extrovert. I am an introverted person. In addition to that, I've been hurt so many times by people without having to do anything at all. Like, I just needed to exist. I didn't have to harm anyone. I didn't have to say anything harmful. I didn't have to be rude. I could be kind, courteous, nice, chill by myself, and I would be viewed as a threat. Just my presence alone upsets people. And growing up knowing that my presence irks people's nerves has been a curse my entire life. And it wasn't until the past few years that I was actually looking at my birth chart and saw that I was a Scorpio rising, and also that I have a stellium in the 10th house that shows that I will always be seen. Like, I'm just someone that's always going to be seen whether I like it or not, and that was just outside of my control. Either way, the point that I'm making here is that dream was something that I was seeing as a warning, as a you have to go back or else. But then when I look at where everything is pointing to, it just seems that it didn't matter. It was going to happen anyways, which I feel a little bit of resentment for, because if this was going to occur regardless, then I should have returned. And then also felt this heavy burden for the past few years of trying to discover who I was, because I was told I needed to discover this as part of, I don't know how to describe it, but a pathway in a sense to help prevent this from occurring. And now that I remember who I am, I just don't really understand what difference it makes. It's one of those things where it's like, okay, now I know who I am. Now what? Like, now what do we do next? And I've realized that I was causing additional stress, like on top of whatever stress I was already dealing with in life. And I've walked away from it. I said that this is something that I really can't do. I don't see the end point. And even though I was told, like, hey, it's not for you to see, I just don't want to do it. And I said, I'm done. Pick someone else. Because in reality, we're all old souls. And some of us are older than others. I know mine is ancient. But our souls aren't just... Okay, so I've learned a lot, and none of this is going to make sense, but let me try. We aren't 7 billion or 7.8. I can't remember the population right now. Almost 8 billion, essentially. We aren't almost 8 billion souls. We are split up, fragmented into multiple bodies. And it's important for us not to remember who we are so that we can be integrated in the system seamlessly. If you knew that you were multiplied multiple times and that those were all you, like that's you, that's you, that's you, that's you, and those people over there too are part of your soul family, all split up, then how would you really be able to live this new identity? You wouldn't. You would have that in the back of your mind, and that's what makes it so hard when you do awaken. There's different levels of consciousness, and there's also enlightenment. Awakening is completely different. There are people that are saying they're awakened because they have a higher consciousness, but they're not actually awakened. When you actually awaken, that's you re-remembering who you are. It's like an added level of consciousness, because consciousness is more information and being tapped in and being connected to spirit, whereas awakening is you re-remembering who you are. So now, remembering who you are, knowing who you are, what you used to do in the spirit world, all your little jobs, now you're trying to pretend to be human, and it's hard because for me, I'm looking at everything and I'm just like, I don't connect. I try to connect, I pretend to connect, but it's hard to do this anymore because this isn't me. This isn't my body. This isn't my true identity. And I know that this is one of many lives that I have lived. And that's another issue too. When you remember, you may remember other lives, and then there's times where I have been completely confused because I would go to sleep and it felt like I was just dropped into another life, and it felt as real as this one. It didn't feel like a dream. It wasn't like a vivid dream or a lucid dream. It felt as if I was living as another human being, and I was walking around doing what I normally do as this other human being. Time did not lapse. It wasn't like, oh, it seems like it's 3 and then it just switched to 7. No, time went by the same way it does now. And I was in a completely different body with a completely different past history. And I was thinking about my normal day-to-day things as I would in this life. And then what happens is my primary self, or what I consider my primary self, wakes up, and I'm confused because I'm like, who am I? This is not me. And then I remember, wait, this is me. That was somebody else, or maybe that was me too. It felt like me. It had my history. It had my life. It didn't feel like it was me. And imagine this happening, and it's real. It's real. It's not like a vivid dream. Like, you're confused. It's confusing. Time gets confusing because it feels like time is like it evaded me. Like it just doesn't exist. And I know it doesn't really just not exist, because when I was over there, I understood everything. I understood what it was, because it was like I remembered everything when I was gone. But then when I came back, a lot of that information slipped away, and I tried to hold on to as much as I could. But time felt like it didn't exist, but at the same time it did. It was just way more complex. And I feel like it's easier to say it doesn't exist because that's how it for the most part felt. But I think it was just beyond the human concept, but not beyond our concept. We just don't remember because we're supposed to be integrated in this reality. If we remember, then we can't live this life. We can't be who we are. We can't believe so strongly in it. And overall, I don't know what's going to happen. I believe more so now, with everything that has occurred in the past, that what I did see when I had departed will actually happen. And I was not believing this, mostly because I was basing it on the reality of that time. And that reality was real. And it just goes to show how much life can change regardless. You know, you could think it's one way and then it becomes something else. Many of us didn't see this kind of future. And I'm sure a lot of people who are in that boomer generation thought their lives would end up being very, very different from what it is now, because they planned for a completely different future. So, and I'm mentioning them specifically because they've lived the longest compared to the rest of us. Like, and I'm not talking about like not longer than the silent generation, but what I mean is that they could see the most change over their years. And I'm sure they didn't see all of what they saw throughout the past 50 years actually being something that they would actually see. You know, there's so many things that has changed and evolved, and we're just in a different place. But the one thing that I do know, and I feel comfortable sharing this, is that humans have lost their way. So that is part of the problem. Humans have lost the way. Now, what's the way? I actually wasn't told. I feel like essentially I had been given a mission or told I have a mission without being told what the mission was and how the mission is supposed to be accomplished. Just remember who you are. And some of those things that I also learned is like, okay, we have a little trinket of knowledge here and there, but that's about it. And one of the things is humans have lost their way, but then how do they get back on the way, and what's the way exactly? And the answer is, I don't know. I just don't know. And I wish I knew. I wish I had an answer, but I don't. And it's not like I can't or I won't eventually get an answer. I just don't think that it will be anytime soon. Sometimes I get information, and I have gotten information over the past 6 years, just like I didn't know who I was. I mean, I was told who I was, but I didn't remember who I was. And that's the difference. Is one thing to say, hey, this is who you are, and a whole nother thing to actually remember. Because if someone tells you you are, I don't know, let's make something up, you are Daffy Duck, right? But you look like Minnie Mouse, you're not going to believe that. You're going to be like, okay, sure. But then if you start getting memories or you start having visions of being Daffy Duck, then you'll realize, oh, I was Daffy Duck. I'm just Minnie Mouse right now. And this is just a temporary life. Like, I'm not going to stay Minnie Mouse forever. I'm going to go back to being Daffy Duck in what is the past or the future, whatever you want to call it. Regardless, the point is what I essentially saw was going to be mass destruction. And it wasn't even really millions. It was billions of people. I keep saying millions, but it was actually billions of people. It was a heavy loss. I wasn't certain if it was 100% of everyone, but it was definitely at least 50%. Like it was pretty bad. And I'm saying this because it was multiple countries involved. There was only so much I got to see because eventually I was snatched out of there and then pushed back here. I don't know if it was because I was there too long, but they were like, you have to go. And I was like, no, I don't. I do not have to go. I'm not going. And I felt myself being dragged back as I was like, no, like, no, like, don't. So yeah, it was an experience. And I think my experience is very different from everyone else's experiences. I've listened to other people's NDEs, and some of them have some similar things to mine, but for the most part, it was different. And I didn't see us having bodies. We didn't have any bodies. We were like energy, kind of like light, but not really. So that was one thing for sure. And at the time, I was atheist, so there was no religious thing coming to me at all. I wanted to see the truth, and actually had been seeking the truth for the longest time, where I was at a point where I was like, I want to see the truth, nothing but the truth, and that's it. And I was allowed to see the truth, and that truth has slowly been revealing over time. I've realized that the spiritual community more and more see that truth and know that truth, but regardless, it's only a small group of people. And I still don't know if it's going to make a difference. I know that I have a limitation of what I can do. And like I stated before, even with this, like, no one's going to see this. I could talk for as long as I want to. No one's going to see this video. And even if they did, it doesn't help, because what can you do? You can't prevent the future devastation. You can't stop it. You can't Well, let me take that back. I'm not going to say you can't prevent it or you can't stop it, because you can. But that has to do with people that are on a higher level, people that probably believe that they won't be impacted, and they will. It's not going to be a simple kind of like, oh, like, it's not going to be like Japan where they can just rebuild and they'll be able to come back. The whole place is going to be decimated, so much so that if you do rebuild, it would be probably hundreds of years, maybe centuries in the future. It wouldn't be anytime soon, because that's how many people are going to be obliterated. So it's not one of those circumstances where the damage would be bad, but not so bad to where you can't rebuild. It's going to be irreparably damaged. And I don't think leaders who are involved in these talks or making these decisions truly understand how big of an impact their decision is going to make. I don't think any of them are completely aware. Well, no, I already know. Yes, I do know. They have no idea. I'm not going to say I think. They don't. They don't know. And that's the biggest issue. When you are not aware of the potential consequences of your actions, then you are fully intending to do whatever you need to do based on your limited understanding of the fallout. So as a person who has seen what will happen and thought that I could potentially do something because I was told that that's my mission, I realized that I can't do anything. And it's not like knowing this has changed me from wanting to be here anymore. I've definitely tried again and was unsuccessful, but I was threatened. I was told, like, if you keep trying, you're just going to be returned back. And they did it without even saying anything. You know, the last times they said something, this time they didn't say anything. It was like pitch black. They were like, we're just going to send you back. That's it. We told you what you needed to hear, and we're not going to say anything else to you anymore. And that was it. So my experience was different each time, and I know why, but that's what happened. But I'm going to end this here. This has gone on for a long time. It was just rambling for the most part. Thank you so much for the one person that may potentially somehow get here. I highly doubt you made it this far, but if you did, I hope you have a wonderful day.